Hello, welcome to Week 2 Advanced Legal Research. Today we're going to be talking about secondary sources, specifically legal commentary. Secondary sources, as I mentioned last week, are the single best way to start your research, particularly when you're a new attorney or if you're researching a new area of the law. So in short, secondary sources are anything that we use to teach ourselves about an area of the law. These resources are not the primary law, cases, statutes, regulations, and the like. There's somebody else writing about and explaining the primary law. Lawyers and law students, professors, and law librarians use these resources because, frankly, the primary law is often difficult to understand. This is particularly true when you're a new lawyer, like you all will be in a few years, or when you're an old lawyer like me who's not familiar with a particular area of the law. Anyway, secondary resources really are the secret sauce to doing successful legal research. You will be amazed how much easier it is to make sense of a statute or regulation after you've read commentary from an expert in the field, explaining not only what the statute means, but how it fits into the general regulatory scheme. If you ever have that panicky, I am totally overwhelmed feeling when you're doing legal research, try to find a secondary source to explain things to you. I did this in practice for over 20 years, and I can guarantee this is the way to go when you're not an expert in the area that you're researching. So when we talk about secondary sources, we're really covering a lot of ground. They range from the informal blog post written by an attorney practitioner to a multi-volume treatise written by a scholar expert in the field. So now we'll just go through some of the more commonly used secondary sources that are considered to be commentary, just so you can get an idea of what's out there and why they might be used. And then you'll see on each slide I've provided you with some of the advantages and disadvantages. So the first is something like a dictionary. Black's Law Dictionary, you all know probably from your first year. There's also things like legal thesauruses and other citation books like the Blue Book. And these are good because they give you definitions, they give you some ideas of search terms to use. They may sometimes provide some primary law citation, but you're not really going there for that with this particular resource. And the disadvantage, of course, is they only provide limited information. It may be a good place to start your research, but you're never going to stop here. Here's another example of legal commentary, which are legal encyclopedias. Legal encyclopedias contain brief, broad summaries of legal topics. They provide introductions to legal topics and explain relevant terms of art. They also provide citations to the primary law, quite a lot as compared to the dictionaries that we just talked about. Sometimes they give you citations to major law review articles where you can get more citations to primary law. Encyclopedias are available both in print and online, and they fall into three main categories: nationally focused, which cover broad topical areas of the law; state-specific, which focus on the law in a single jurisdiction; and subject-specialized, which provide coverage of an area of the law such as corporations, family law, or tax. So there's two main nationally focused legal encyclopedias in the United States, and that's AmJur and CJS. They're useful, but they're not well suited for jurisdiction-specific research. Obviously, then you'd want to use a state-specific one. And state legal encyclopedias will describe a particular topic, usually give a brief history of the development of the law in the particular state that the encyclopedia is treated, and provide you with the discussion of the leading cases and/or relevant statutes. State encyclopedias are available in print and also usually available on Lexis and Westlaw. Not every state has a legal encyclopedia, but bigger states like New York and California do. The depth of coverage and quality varies depending on the legal encyclopedia that you're looking at. Our particular legal encyclopedia, NYJUR, or New York Jurisprudence, is quite good. Electronic versions of the encyclopedias are updated directly, and if you're using a print encyclopedia, which we still have here in the library, always remember to check the pocket part for updates. So when you use an encyclopedia, you'll be getting a much briefer and less detailed discussion of the topic than you would if you used a treatise or a law review article, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. That being said, and this is a practice tip from me, I always advise starting simple when you're learning a new area of the law or you're starting a new research assignment. And legal encyclopedias are a good example of starting simple. The articles are relatively brief, they're easy to understand, and they provide you with enough citation to the primary law to get you started. Think of a Wikipedia article. So this is Wikipedia for lawyers. You can always circle back and use a more comprehensive resource such as a treatise or a law review article later once you have a basic understanding of the law you're researching. But to this day, I'll still go to a legal encyclopedia first and read that so I can familiarize myself with the area of the law and get my arms around whether it's jurisdiction is state or federal, and where I'm likely to get the primary law, whether it's going to be statute or case law. So legal encyclopedias are a great way to do that. Here's another kind of legal commentary. American law reports, also known as ALR, are kind of their own animal. They might look a little bit like AmJur or CJS at first blush, but they're distinguished from those two sources, which are both legal encyclopedias, by their extensive annotations. And the term annotation as used in ALR is a bit misleading, because ALR annotations are in fact quite lengthy. They're articles that treat narrow topic areas in great detail. So ALR annotations combine the best features of a case report, a law review article, and a legal encyclopedia article. Each topic has a specific annotation, and it provides in-depth analysis of that legal issue, and then gives you a complete list of every case in every jurisdiction that discusses that issue. So you can see it would be quite helpful if you were doing national research or a 50-state comparison on a particular area, or you just wanted to know how something was considered in the common law in the country, but maybe not as useful if you were doing a specific Connecticut law, employment issue. So it depends on what you're looking at, what you're going to use. As background, the numbered series of ALR reports began back in 1919. ALR is now in its sixth series, known as ALR 6. There's also two federal series which began publication in 1969, and these are known as ALR Fed and ALR Fed Second. So prior to 1969, federal issues were treated as part of the main series. So ALR annotations, as I mentioned briefly, are not jurisdiction specific. So if you're researching a New York law issue, this may not be the best place to turn. But that being said, as I mentioned earlier, each annotation does have a table of jurisdictions to help you find relevant cases on the topic in specific states. So if you wanted to get a general idea, for instance, of the felony murder rule, and you wanted to see how it was applied across the country, then you wanted to know how it was applied specifically in New York or Delaware, ALR would be a great place to go. And ALR, like the legal encyclopedias we talked about, are available both in print and on Westlaw and Lexis. Alright, so here's the next kind of legal commentary that we're going to talk about, and this is legal treatises. Treatises, which is not to be confused with treaties, are book-length expositions of the law as it pertains to a particular subject. So treatises can be scholarly in nature, like Blackstone's commentaries on the law, or they could be geared toward a particular legal subject area, such as a manual or a handbook that a practitioner would use. So a legal treatise can also be a short single volume, like when I was practicing securities law, I might have had a specific area of security law and I would have the treatise in my office so I could turn to it often. Or it could be a large multi-volume set, like the tax treatises, which can go up to 20 to 25 volumes. There's many treatises available electronically on Lexis and Westlaw, and many treatises are still available in print. Some treatises, a few, although not many, are available still to this day only in print and not electronically, but most of them you can get either in a specialized database that's geared toward a practitioner in a particular subject area of the law, or you can get them on the general legal research platforms like Westlaw, Lexis, or Bloomberg Law. All right, continuing on with our conversation about the different kinds of legal treatises, because it is such a big area. Different kinds of legal treatises have different purposes. So here's the most common type of legal treatises that you are most likely to use. And I'll talk about them in order, going from the type of treatise with the most general treatment of an area of law to the most detailed and most, unfortunately, also the most complicated treatment. But it would depend on the question that you're trying to answer which one you would use. So the first one I'll talk about is the nutshell. And you've probably all used these already. They provide a great overview of a legal topic without the detailed analysis or extensive case referencing that you'll find in other treatises. Nutshells really are a great place to turn if you don't have a lot of time and you just need some general background of an area of the law. So next up, legal hornbooks. You've probably seen these as well because they're designed as teaching tools for law students. Hornbooks will provide a more detailed treatment of an area of the law than nutshells. They also usually contain summaries of landmark cases and other useful details. Next is the treatises that are designed to serve as practitioner tools. These works tend to address realistic legal problems, and they often provide useful features for practicing lawyers such as forms and tables. So these are more designed for the practitioner rather than the scholar. Loose leaf services are an example of the kind of treatise that we're talking about here. Loose leafs often cover like regulation-intensive subjects such as banking, tax, Medicare, or securities laws. And here in this picture you can see a loose leaf treatise. This treatise, to be honest, always scared the heck out of me when I was a practicing lawyer and I had to use it as a corporate lawyer. This is the 73,000 page, 25 volume CCH Standard Federal Tax Reporter. And works such as this address realistic legal problems, and they often provide, as I said, features such as forms and citations to the law that you need to get, and even agency website information. So the advantage of this kind of treatise is that it allows you to move seamlessly between the primary material, here the tax law, tax regulations, and IRS interpretations, to more analytical resources that help you interpret and apply the law. So if you're trying to interpret a particular section of the Internal Revenue Code for your client, say they wanted to set up a 501c3 corporation, which is a not-for-profit corporation, this would be a great resource to use. It would give you the text of the law, it would give you the interpretations had been made by the IRS, and then it would give you forms to set up that kind of a corporation. It's detailed, it's authoritative, and it's organized, as I said, by Internal Revenue Code section. So even though this treatise always scared me a bit when I had to use it, I'm sure it would have been my best friend if I were a tax lawyer. Another type of secondary resource that's considered legal commentary is a restatement. Restatement's kind of an odd duck. It's an attempt to organize and codify the common law of the United States. So various areas of law are restated into chapters, titles, and sections. Restatements are published by the American Law Institute, or ALI, whose members are distinguished lawyers, judges, and legal scholars. And although restatements are not primary law, they are one of the few secondary sources that carry great weight with the courts, and they're cited for common law issues. So you'll often see the judges citing them and the parties citing them to the judges. However, as with all sources, you need to know your audience. Restatements have been criticized recently by some judges as presenting the law as the writer would like it to be and not as it is. So always a good idea to look at the judge's prior opinions and see whether they're a fan of a particular source or not. Restatements cover broad areas of law such as contracts, property, foreign relations, employment law, and torts. The most heavily cited restatement is the restatement of torts and the restatement of contracts, as you can imagine. That's a huge and important area of law. Restatements are available in print as shown here in the picture, and they're also available on both Westlaw and Lexis. Last but certainly not least, as far as secondary sources that we consider legal commentary, are law review articles, which some of you may be very familiar with if you're on a journal and you're doing site checking and then eventually you're going to write your own note. So law reviews are secondary sources that provide commentary on a specific area of the law, and by that I don't necessarily mean that the law review focuses on a particular area of the law, but the articles will. And as you know, some law reviews do focus on, like Journal of Comparative Law. Obviously all the articles are going to be on comparative law, but like the Brooklyn Law Review will cover a wide variety, but each individual article is focusing a very narrow focus, a deep, narrow focus on an area of the law. So there's several hundred journals published by law schools and commercial publishers throughout the United States and the rest of the world. So this is a really good resource to know about. And the articles, as I said, are usually written on narrow legal topics, and they treat the topic very comprehensively. So they can provide a good starting point when you're researching an area of law that's new to you, which is why we mention them. The articles explain and analyze the law, and they have extensive footnotes that can lead you to additional primary and secondary resources. And they're usually of very good quality as well. They've been researched very well, and then they've been also site checked. So many law reviews are available on Lexis and Westlaw, and also through the other electronic database subscriptions that I can show you through the library's website. More importantly, if you're site checking, the Hein Online database provides you with the PDF files of almost every single law review back to their first issue. So Hein Online is good to know about. If you're site checking, I can show you how to use that in more detail. And we'll spend more time talking about how to find relevant law review articles next week using both general search methods and the specialized legal periodical indexes. So that's part of next week's class. But just for now, I'll mention again another practice tip, and this worked for me when I was practicing on my own and I didn't have access to a lot of the expensive electronic databases, you can get law review articles from the publisher's website. And what I would do is I would search and I would find a law review article on the area that I was trying to teach myself about, and I wouldn't necessarily read the whole 50-page article. I'd read the first 10 pages or so. They have great introductions. They provide a general introduction to the area of law, and then in that introduction it would also cite to the primary law that was going to be relevant to my issue. So I could mine those first 10 pages for citations to the place in the U.S. Code or the big Supreme Court case, and then go ahead and get started with my research from there. So I found law review articles to be invaluable. Maybe was my favorite kind of commentary that I would use in practice. Okay, two last sources of secondary resources that I wanted to briefly mention are legal research guides available on the internet. And, it doesn't always have to be written secondary sources. You can talk to the person giving you your assignment. You can talk to your peers and ask them not only what they know about a particular area of the law that you're researching, but also what resources they suggest that you look at. That can be a gold mine. They'll know the leading treatise, or they'll know the leading practice guide for you to look at. So always ask that before you leave a person's office. What do they suggest you look at? What do they like? Back to the legal research guides on the internet. These are great. They're freely available. They're mostly written by academic law librarians, probably why I love them. And there's as many of them out there as there are topics of law that you need to research. So let's take a look at how you find them. So on the internet, I decided to just use the example of art law. You just type into Google or whatever search engine you're using, legal research guide, and then put in your topic, art law, contract law, maritime law, whatever it might be. And I'm going to pull up the first one, which is from Georgetown Law Library. They have really good ones. And you can see they're great resources. So if you're brand new, you have no idea what you're doing in a particular area, this will give you a background about what art law is. And then if you look over on the left, there's some links that you can click getting started. So it'll explain what you should do to teach yourself this area of the law. And then it'll also give you the primary law. It'll give you citation to where in the United States Code, for example, you could find provisions dealing with art law and the various state laws. And then it's going to give you some secondary source recommendations. So it'll tell you the leading art law treatise and the leading art law databases, and then further research tools, which might refer you to some other legal research guide or some other sources. So I suggest that you go ahead and explore these when you're trying to just get started in an area that you're not familiar with. If you want to take a look at our research guides, go to the Law Library homepage and then click on Research Guides, and there you can see a list of all the guides that we've produced. You can look at them by subject, by type, or by owner, meaning the author of them. So not a bad place to get your research started. So keep them in mind. They're all available for free on the internet, so you'll be able to continue using these after you graduate, and you can use the research guides of other law libraries now and after you graduate as well. And so the last thing I just want to mention is don't forget to use a secondary resource as your first step when you're doing a new legal research project or when you're just a newer lawyer in general. Otherwise, you're going to be reinventing the wheel, which is never a good idea. We're always very cost conscious when we're billing clients. So use a secondary resource first. Otherwise, you're going to be wasting your time and your client's money. All right, so that wraps up the video lecture. Before you go, don't forget to take the week 2 quiz and submit your results, and I will see you in class.